What's quaking, people? Counter to Quake here, coming at you with my reaction to Sabaton History number 47. All right, I'm very excited about this. This was recommended and donated for by Draconic Afterlife, a really good friend of mine. This is number 47 of the Sabaton Histories, Panzer Battalion, the Iraq War. Now, this is one of the things that the lead singer was talking about in the last episode that I watched anyway, was that when you do recent events, you run the risk of looking biased because it's in your lifetime. It's an event that is relative to your life. You know, when we go back in my generation, people, I was born in 1990. When we talk about World War II, that's history. It's a historical event. The soldiers have come back and told their story. So we can talk about what actually, what's the historical facts that we've been told of how the war actually went on. But when it comes to things like the Iraq War, things like 9/11, things like that, where it's like, that was in my life. I was 11 years old when that happened, 9/11. I mean, so like it was emotionally effective on me. So it's, obviously my opinion on it, my view on it will most likely be way more biased and definitely more emotionally charged than somebody, say, who's learning about it in high school now, who was not alive when it happened. So it's very interesting that this one's about the Iraq War. I'm pretty sure they said they don't really do that anymore. They try to stay away from modern events and go back, or modern-ish events, and go back and just do things like World War I. Like the last album they did, I think the last two albums they did were all World War I, which is awesome albums, by the way. But yeah, so let's not waste any more time, guys. Let's check it out. This is Panzer Battalion, the Iraq War, Sabaton History, number 47. Oh, real quick, before I forget, if you guys want me to react to something on YouTube, it's $10 per 10 minutes. There's a link down below for donations. If you want me to react to something but you don't quite want to pay $10, you can always come to one of my Twitch live streams. It's only $3 per 10 minutes there. Also down below are links to my throne and my merch store. There are a lot of ways to support the channel if you can, but if you can't, likes, comments, subscriptions, those help immensely. All right, guys, with that out of the way, let's jump right into this. I don't want to waste any more time.
I'm Indy Nidell.
And I'm Pat from Sabaton.
This is Sabaton History. When coalition forces led by the United States attacked Iraq in 2003, it was mainly armored cavalry that did the heavy lifting.
And Panzer Battalion became the first ever song in the Sabaton history about war history.
Oh yeah, this riff.
September 11th, 2001 changed the way the United States perceived its role in the world. The end of the Cold War had brought an illusion of lasting peace and security over the West, an illusion that was shattered as civilian planes were turned into weapons. On September 20th, U.S. President George W. Bush addressed the American nation, emphasizing that the new war on terror would begin with those behind the attack, the terrorist groups of Al-Qaeda. But it would not end until those who harbored terrorists and assisted or enabled them had been defeated all over the world. The Bush Doctrine transformed the national military strategy from limited peacekeeping missions to full-on war with boots on the ground on foreign soil. The war in Afghanistan that began in October ended in the complete defeat of the conventional Taliban militia in a short time. But this was just a first step, and also served as a training ground for preparation and mobilization, which the U.S. would need, for example, to defeat Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq. Since the Gulf War in the early 1990s, the U.S. military presence safeguarded Kuwait against Iraqi aggression. But by March 2003, it would be the jumping-off point for a full invasion. By the 20th, the ultimatum for Saddam Hussein and his sons to exit Iraq had expired. Operation Iraqi Freedom, with its rather lofty goal of establishing a democratic, peaceful, and prosperous Iraq free from the oppression of the Ba'athist regime, was to begin. On the 20th, U.S. forces, supported by a coalition contingent from Australia, Great Britain, and Poland, advanced. The ultimate objective was Baghdad. Surprise attacks by Tomahawk missiles to kill Saddam and his high command had failed in the nights before. But this was all just the beginning of a new age of warfare. The classic industrial age had been overturned by the new age of information-based warfare. Battlefields were observed through through digital links, and units and missiles were guided by global positioning systems, GPS. This was all something new. First blood was drawn at the Talil Air Base and An Nasiriyah, close to the Euphrates River. Would the Iraqi forces sell themselves dearly with determined and disciplined resistance, or would they surrender and run in the face of overwhelming opposition? Well, Iraqi High Command was very much aware that they would stand no chance straight up against American tanks in the open desert. Instead, they had planned for a wide defense in depth with dispersed strongpoints all over the Green Line, which ran straight through the country. The most effective Iraqi defenses were placed along the highways and in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, which the coalition forces would have to use to advance quickly. Most Iraqi soldiers stood by their colors initially, engaging the invaders with the weapons available to them. But there was only so much they could do with ancient T-62 tanks against modern A-10 Warthogs and bunker-busting battle tanks, and with a minimal air...
Bunker-busting battle tank. That's just a fun phrase. Bunker-busting battle tank. Sounds like a video game.
Of course, they suffered terrible losses the night of shock and awe, March 22nd. The full might of the coalition Air Force descended on Iraq's command centers, air defense systems, and missile and artillery batteries. All throughout the country, explosions flared from the cruise missiles fired by the warships in the Persian Gulf. The immediate Iraqi response was to fire theater ballistic missiles and surface-to-surface missiles towards the invading force and into Kuwait. However, the air defense net of Patriot batteries from Kuwait to Saudi Arabia and Turkey was worth the money and blew 100% of those missiles straight out of the air before they could do any harm.
That's insane, because especially when they talk about how much more advanced the coalition, right? How much more advanced the U.S. and all those the forces on their side were in their military force compared to like Iraq. The fact that they had the technology, or they had the means to be able to shoot all of those missiles out of the sky is impressive in its own right. That's crazy.
The coalition was worried, though, about a
I was right. They do call them the coalition. I don't know why I second-guessed myself there.
Chemical attack. You may remember one major reason why the U.S. had attacked Iraq was the belief that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction.
That was the thing. That was the biggest thing, is that they were claiming to have weapons. They were supposedly claiming to have weapons of mass destruction. That was what we took to the UN. This is why we want to invade. They said they have weapons of mass destruction. They're going to unleash them. And then apparently we didn't find anything when we went there. So that's when a lot of the theories were risen. I'm not going to speak on what my beliefs are or whatever, but the theories were, that was all bullshit. It was Bush just wanted the oil. Bush invaded for the oil. There were never any threats of weapons of mass destruction. It was all just a hoax so he can go and get oil. So that's what a lot of people thought. And
now, as the regime was on the verge of collapse, it would surely use them, right? The second wild card was the host of irregular forces. The Ba'ath Party militia, and especially the fanatical Saddam Fedayeen, Saddam's martyrs, may have been only poorly trained and mostly equipped with Kalashnikovs and rocket-propelled grenades, but their fanaticism was cause for concern. American soldiers soon began complaining that they could not separate the guerrilla fighters from the civilians since they wore no uniforms. The guerrillas had stashed munitions around the big cities, in schools and in mosques, hoping to draw the attackers into the teeth of a popular army.
That's the thing. And not only that, did they not wear uniforms and they're indistinguishable. I mean, there are stories for people coming back saying they gave bombs to kids, women that just look unassuming. Like, there's that scene in American Sniper with Bradley Cooper. Great movie, by the way, directed by Clint Eastwood. Where he's got a sniper trained on somebody, and then there's he's watching a soldier's back, I think, and this kid runs up to him, and he's like, he's just a kid, but it turns out the kid had like a grenade on him, and that is despicable. War in and of itself, war is hell, it's killing, it's death, it's destruction, but innocent children. like giving them weapons to go up and like kamikaze themselves on soldiers is the lowest form of just despicable. It's ridiculous. It's evil, man. It's downright evil.
Others like the Al-Quds militia, the youth organization Lions of Saddam, and non-Iraqi volunteers would be equally dangerous in their fanaticism, if not in their military value. They wore no uniforms either, and they hid in hospitals and schools, communicating via low-power radios and simple cell phones. On March 23rd, Iraq's defense stiffened. The regular army was fortifying strongpoints all over the country while irregulars were gathering in the city streets, or they attacked the long lines of coalition supply columns. Task Force Tarawa lost 18 men trapped in an open engagement, while the 507th Maintenance Company ran into a hail of fire with 11 killed and 16 captured. Now, I have to say that the story of the Iraq War is still brought to us from a Western perspective.
That's what I was trying to say. The story of that war, like even the story of the war that I know, like stuff you've been hearing me say just now, I also admit and acknowledge that it is an American-tinted story. I don't know the 100% factual truth of the situation in the engagement. I don't, because all I know is what I was given, and we like to think that our media here is unbiased and not state-run, and that is complete and total bullshit. No matter what side of the spectrum you're on politically, it's bullshit. There's an agenda behind every media coverage. Every media coverage is in some way, shape, or form is state-run, in some way, shape, or form. So. Yeah, not to get all punk rock on you guys, but yeah, I know that my understanding of the war is a Western skewed view, for sure.
Full and cohesive Iraqi perspective is, to my knowledge, still lacking. But it is easy to say here that the Iraqi casualties were disproportionately higher during the invasion.
That doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that the Iraqi casualties were disproportionately higher because we were disproportionately more capable as well. That's the thing, you know, and that's not a bias. That's just what they're talking about. We just have way more technology. Our military spending is higher than anyone else's. So I mean, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that the casualties were much higher on their side.
The Americans used their combined arms doctrine to the fullest. It was a systematic approach to envelop cities and strongpoints from both sides, leaving it to airstrikes and attack helicopters to soften up the defenses before the armor engaged. Hunter-killer teams of Bradley and M1 tanks outfitted with superior fire control and night and thermal vision fired deadly combinations of sabot and heat shells into enemy armor. Hellfire missiles marked headquarters for F-15 pilots to take out, all while more mobile reconnaissance troops and Humvees continuously pushed on. Supported by informers within the city, often taxi drivers on mobile phones, special ops troops made surgical strikes against Ba'ath Party buildings. In the south, UK forces were isolating Basra, taking heavy fire from the irregular forces hiding inside the city. Kurdish Peshmerga forces were operating in the north, trying to draw Iraqi forces away, while special ops were securing key airfields, military facilities, and missile batteries. It became clear, though, that all along the Green Line, they were facing an army that was prepared to fight asymmetrically. Snipers and machine gunners lay in ambush. Mines and explosives were hidden along the roads. Rocket launchers were fired from civilian buildings. Mortar pits and heavy guns mounted on pickup trucks took the advancing columns under fire. Republican death squads forced civilians to fight at gunpoint, forcing them out into the streets where they met certain deaths. There were suicidal attacks with RPGs and trucks against tanks. Even the elite Republican Guard, the proud Nebuchadnezzar, Medea, and Al-Nida divisions, never truly stood a chance. From the 25th to the 29th, the move northward continued. The big cities were isolated until aggressive armored patrols, like the British demonstrated in Basra, could take them from the irregulars. Consuming 2 million gallons of fuel a day, the main bulk of the invasion force continued on towards Baghdad. All in all, a distance comparable to that from the Normandy beaches to the bridges on the Rhine. They established a cordon around Baghdad and prepared for the assault. Again, American high command was unsure how this would play out. Would the civilians cooperate and cheer for the collapse of Saddam's regime? Or would their enemies fight to the last from house to house, intending to inflict as many casualties on the coalition as possible? What was Baghdad a trap or a hollow shell? There was only one way to find out. On April 7th, the Marine Corps prepared a Thunder Run. An armored unit, what other nations might call a Panzer Battalion, would rapidly advance into the city and find out firsthand how the Iraqis would react. That day, all while Mohammed Saeed al-Sahaf, a.k.a. Baghdad Bob, the Iraqi information minister, was claiming that no American infidels would ever set foot inside Baghdad, the Marine Corps was heading into downtown. Nearly unopposed, they drove through the streets, straight to the heart of Saddam Hussein's regime. But they did not turn back and get support. Instead, they chose to remain, and thus ended a siege before it even began.
Wow.
After a while, the Iraqi people came out of their houses and began, indeed, cheering for the coalition troops. They came so close that the Americans had to rely on interpreters on loudspeakers to get the crowd to calm down. At Al-Firdos Square, the people gathered around a huge...
I remember this. This was on the news. We're like, oh, it's the end of the war. Look, they took him down. Obviously, it wasn't quite the end yet, but they had made it into Baghdad. I remember that being on the news. I was like 13, I think, when that happened.
Statue of Saddam, tying a noose around its neck and pounding it with sledgehammers. An American recovery vehicle finally brought it down. Now, one American soldier put an American flag around the statue's head, but the Iraqis protested, and not wanting to look like an occupation force, the Americans agreed and were handed an Iraqi flag, one without the writing on it that Saddam had introduced. Mm-hmm. It was a symbol that his regime was at its end, and that the people of Iraq were about to determine their own future. The fighting would continue for weeks in the north, and even just a few blocks away in Baghdad, as Marines there were already engaged in a tenacious firefight. The counterinsurgency would soon become worse, and the post-invasion tale of Iraq is anything but a fairy tale of nation building. But that was the future, for the song Panzer Battalion came out on Sabaton's Primo Victoria album, recorded in 2004 and released in 2005. And for this...
That's kind of crazy. That is as modern events as you get. They recorded this album a year after the events actually happened. That's kind of crazy. They don't really do that anymore.
This moment, the Iraq War seemed to be over and won. On May 1st, 2003, President Bush declared on the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, mission accomplished. Now, that's really interesting.
That's crazy. It really is. Yeah, I remember that moment. I remember that being on the news, them pulling the statue down and everything. And I think it's very interesting that they put like an American flag over his head, and the Iraqi citizens protested, and they gave them an Iraqi flag. I said, okay, yeah, sure, yeah, we don't want to. We're not dictators here. We'll use an Iraqi flag. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, no. Obviously, in retrospect, it's 2023. We know that it did not end there, and it was messy and brutal. And trying to enlist a new government or instill a new government into a nation is not easy to do. It's not easy to do. And once you leave, they're fragile, right? So it's a hard thing to do. It's like terraforming a planet almost. It's very difficult.
Because, everybody who knows you associates you with military history of one way or another. So this is the very first one.
Everything has a beginning. And everything has an end.
Okay, well, let's not talk about the last one, though.
No.
But how did it come around? I mean, how did you, tell us this story?
So first of all, Sabaton is not the first band in history that writes songs with a military topic about war. Sure. There has been plenty of them before us. It's a recording we did in 2003. And the song Panzer Battalion, before we even entered the studio, we had been practicing it and stuff like that. But when we had recorded it, it was in the same recording session as we made Primo Victoria, actually.
All right, okay.
And together with those two songs, it definitely changed the whole like sound of Sabaton.
Really?
Before that, we were the metalizer. We were that kind of sound, those type of songs. But when we came with Panzer Battalion and Primo Victoria, everything for Sabaton changed completely. Originally, the album Primo Victoria was supposed to be called Panzer Battalion. It was supposed to be the title track of that album.
I guess.
However, when we sent it away to record labels and we were like, this is the artwork we want. So it was my old friend who also designed the Sabaton logotype. He did the first cover artwork for Panzer Battalion.
Panzer Battalion. Okay.
And
what was it?
tanks.
Never could have guessed that.
So he did this artwork and we sent it away to the record label who said, no, wait, you cannot do that. Guys, you are playing melodic heavy metal. When you make an album look like that with a title like Panzer Battalion, people are going to say that you are a German trash metal band. And we can't really give you that.
I'm pretty sure he did not say trash. He said thrash, just the accent, just in case anyone's wondering what German trash metal is. I'm pretty sure he said thrash metal.
That approach. So we needed something different. So Primo Victoria became the prominent song of the album, which obviously was a better choice in the end.
Because that's like is Sabaton.
Yes.
If you did an album now that was Tanks and Tanks for the German label, that you'd be able to get away with it now without being considered that.
Today, yes. Nowadays Sabaton is known as a band who sings about these kind of topics, and people know what to expect when Sabaton release a new album. But nobody had any clue in 2000.
You didn't have any clue.
2004, when we had compiled our first real proper album, except for Metalizer. But nobody knew what to expect from Sabaton.
Right.
Okay, here is an album about stories from war.
So this would be, of course, the first song written for that album. Was Primo Victoria just after that, or were there other things between them?
The first demo contained 3 songs.
Okay.
And it was Panzer Battalion. It was the song Night Child. Who we later rewrote to Purple Heart. And it was the song Primo Victoria. So these 3 songs compiled to a demo, which still was under the name of Panzer Battalion.
Okay.
It was manufactured in as little as, I think, 10 copies. And I sent them to 10 different record labels. Maybe, for many years, Nuclear Blast has been our partner as a record label.
Yeah.
And obviously they were one of those that we sent these demos to. Yeah. I have a letter from them saying that your music is not interesting.
Nuclear Blast. So,
some years later.
Oh man!
When did you
That is, I hope somebody got fired for that.
sign with them? When did you sign with them later?
We signed with Nuclear Blast in 2009.
Okay, so 5 years later. Basically.
5 years later, they changed their mind.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing for us that they did.
And they released the songs that they first denied.
Aha. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, the story of Panzer Battalion, the first military history song written by Sabaton. So that's it for today for Sabaton History.
Such a good song.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching, and you know the drill. So here is the thing. You have to subscribe, and please, if you want to be a patron, we will be very happy because we really need your support to make this happen, and we want to continue this channel until the end of all times. So thank you for everything, and see you next week.
All right. Yeah, that was awesome. That was really awesome. Yeah, I always figure it's interesting because we talked about on the Primo Victoria's history video that Primo Victoria was like the beginning of that iconic sort of vocal style and sound of Sabaton. So it's interesting that Panzer Battalion was like its partner in establishing what we know of as Sabaton now. Panzer Battalion was what established the material, right? The topic, the subject matter, and then Primo Victoria established the sound. So together these are like the catalytic origins of Sabaton, which is pretty awesome. It's really awesome. And yeah, no, the song Panzer Battalion, like the whole stuff about the Iraq War, like that's stuff that I grew up in. Like I remember, like I said, I was 11 years old when 9/11 happened, and that's what started this whole war on terror thing. And then ever since then, the whole world was different. It had changed. And I remember watching all the Iraq War stuff on the news for the next few years, and it was a big thing. It was a huge thing. And yeah, it's interesting to think about what the other side of it really is. Because, like I said, I have an Americanized, a Western sort of skewed view of the war. Now, I'm not saying that, then it's possible that Saddam Hussein was completely innocent and we're the evil ones. That's not exactly what I'm saying. I'm just saying that history is written by the victors. Best way to put it. History is written by the victors. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this reaction, like, comment, subscribe if you feel so inclined. Follow me on all my social medias, join my Discord, follow me on Twitch. Everything I do is down in the description. Come hang out. Also down there's a link to the Wattpad page for the book that I'm writing. It's called Gales of Fire. It's anime inspired. Every time I write a chapter, it goes up there. There's like 12 chapters up there now. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Until next time, guys, I've been Count Richard Quaid, and I hope you have a seismic